Hello, and welcome to a little bit of a different episode of the College of Creation. My name is Dan, and I am all alone today. Normally, this is a show where me and my co-host Michael make brand new homebrew every single week based on prompts that we get from our audience. We make all kinds of things, from monsters to spells to subclasses to various other features for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. But at this point, Michael is on his paternity leave. They just had their brand new baby. Everyone is wonderful and healthy and doing very well. And I'm just running the show alone for now while they are getting some much needed family time together. So during this period of time, I want to talk about a number of things. I have planned to bring on a guest, so there will be somebody else coming in a little bit later this month that you can hear creating alongside me. But also I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my own creation journey, as well as giving you all some more perhaps actionable and practical tips and tricks for homebrewing yourselves, if this seems like something that you might like to get into. I know we talk around those things a lot on the show. We've talked with guests about their process and how those things go for them, and hopefully you get some good tips and ideas from those conversations. But I figured, what better time to give you some real 101 homebrew advice. Talk about what we're talking about when we discuss the breakdown of features and what we're looking for when we start to put things together. So for now, I want to go through an old creation of mine, do a little bit of a deep dive into one of the first things that I ever homebrewed for a player of mine. And specifically, I want to talk about why it doesn't work very well. And hopefully that idea of, my pitfalls earlier into my homebrewing sort of journey might show you all perhaps some things that you might avoid. Perhaps some ideas that you might have gone down the same path and ended up with the same issues, and perhaps avoid those things in your own journey. So I'm just going to start getting into it, because this was a subclass that I made specifically for a player who wanted to jump into an ongoing game, but they didn't want to play anything overly complicated. Now you will see fairly soon that mission did not actually go very successfully. So we went with Fighter. Fighter is really approachable for new players. There's not a whole lot of overwhelming mechanical stuff to do. You have a few limited use features, but you have nothing close to spell casting. Even amongst key points can be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit complicated if you're fairly new to the overall mechanics of the game. So we went with a Fighter, and Fighter also serves as a pretty good base for a lot of homebrew subclasses. It doesn't have a ton of identity on its own, so you can really use the subclass to form an identity entirely. Now I went in thinking, well, that's great. It's basically a blank slate. It's a nice palette to put on whatever features we're interested in, and so let's play around with that. We decided it would be a fun thing for this character to, have kind of a core flaw. And that core flaw that this player decided on was that perhaps she imbibed a bit too readily and freely. A core aspect of their power comes from a certain level of inebriation. That is to say, drunkenness. So I created the Drunken Warrior Fighter. The idea being that your fighting prowess is fueled by drink. They had a flask that they could regularly refill with all kinds of things, but the core features worked out like this. At 3rd level, you got the drink feature. You can use a bonus action to consume 1 drink. In between long rests, when you have consumed drinks equal to your Constitution modifier, You are drunk for 1 hour per drink consumed. When you have consumed drinks equal to twice your constitution modifier, you are very drunk. Now, this is already very complicated. This is much more complicated than any third level feature should be, especially for a fighter, especially for a new player. So mistake one that I made was really overcomplicating the mechanics almost immediately. It's got this very difficult to track thing of between long rests when you've consumed a certain number of drinks, and that drink number has to be equal to your constitution modifier or up to double your constitution modifier. It's hard to keep track of. It's hard to know where you're at on that track at any given moment. And also, it kind of encourages the player to lower their constitution modifier in order to get the best benefits out of the drunk features. Although, as it will become clear later, the drunk feature is not entirely good. So there's a little bit too much give and take here. Now, the main features that happen when you are drunk are that you have advantage on strength and charisma ability checks and saving throws. So you have a little bit of drunken strength and you have a little bit of swagger. You have disadvantage on dexterity and wisdom ability checks and saving throws, and on saving throws to resist being charmed. So you're more easily charmed. You are less wise and less dexterous and agile while you are drunk. So already we have a benefit that's, it's okay. But then we also have a significant detriment. I did not realize quite so early into my homebrewing journey how devastating disadvantage on saving throws in general is, but especially dexterity and wisdom saving throws. Saving throws are massive in the game of Dungeons & Dragons, and dexterity and wisdom are by far the most common saving throws that are prompted by monster features, by traps, by environmental hazards. Dexterity and wisdom are always going to be there. And so automatically applying disadvantage on those in order to unlock the beneficial side of that, I was already really putting the player at a disadvantage. No pun intended. The other features you get are that your melee weapon attacks deal an additional +1 damage for every drink consumed, which again goes back to the overcomplicated track of keeping really, really close tabs on how many drinks that you had. And then also you are immune to being frightened. Now, when you are very drunk, so this was the marker at which point you have consumed twice your constitution modifier number of drinks or more, you begin to lose control of yourself and must succeed a constitution saving throw with a complicated DC equal to 10 plus the number of drinks. And if you fail, there are various drunken effects that can take place based on a D4 table. I added a D4 table to this thing. You could fall prone, you could attack with disadvantage, you take poison damage, or your melee attacks might deal additional damage. That's the only good one on that list. And then additionally, I added another penalty that each morning, if you were drunk on the previous day, you're considered poisoned for 1 hour per 2 drinks consumed the previous day, which again is so complicated. What am I doing here? You can drink a number of drinks per day equal to your constitution modifier plus 10. If you exceed this number in any one day, you fall unconscious and cannot become conscious again until you complete a long rest. So already, out the gate, we have 6 or 7 penalties that can be applied by this feature in order to gain 3 or possibly 4 benefits. It's too much. All of it across the board, I think, is too much. So the biggest tip that I can give to new homebrewers from this is that when you're developing your rock feature, when we talk about developing features for subclasses especially, we have rocks and we have ribbons. The rocks are the things that are really tied to the core identity of this class or subclass. Those are the things that need to be there, that define and clearly communicate to the player that this is how you are intended to use this class. In this case, this rock feature is encouraging the player that the playstyle of this class is to use bonus actions on your turn to drink drinks, thereby upping your damage and getting a couple of additional benefits. Now, I'm okay with a little bit of push and pull with a rock feature. I'm okay with a little bit of something good coming, but at a cost. The cost here is far too high across the board. You can see if you look at the old Berserker Barbarian that it comes with also a cost that makes it very unappealing to use from a player perspective. When you use your Rage feature as a Battle Rage Barbarian, you get a couple of benefits, extra damage output, you go into your Frenzied Rage, and you get an extra attack and things like that. But it comes at the cost of you taking a level of exhaustion when you leave your Rage, which is a heavy, steep penalty to think about. If you consider that you have multiple Rages per day and that exhaustion doesn't go away until you complete a long rest, and then only one level of exhaustion, that's a high price to pay. In a very similar way, this rock feature asks a lot from the player. It asks them to take disadvantage on very important saving throws. It asks them to potentially lose control of what action they are allowed to take on their turn, or putting them entirely unconscious, taking them entirely out of the game and out of the combat, if that is the case. And potentially applying a pretty steep condition. The poison condition is no joke. If you have drank a lot on the previous day to get the good benefits of this class, you could be dealing with a few hours. So, what can we do for this feature? Well, I actually don't know. I think actually this is kind of unsalvageable in its current state. As a mechanic, I think this idea is already just too complicated and requires too much complex finessing of the character sheet for most players. You have to figure out where the line is for your Constitution modifier to get the most out of this feature while also not cutting into the hit point pool which a fighter needs. Additionally, the drunk effects table, completely useless, should not be there at all. The difference between the drunk and very drunk conditions is also far too complicated. And honestly, this is glorified rage. You could play a barbarian like this, but I resisted the urge to recommend that this person also play a barbarian because there was already a barbarian in the party. I would say, from a homebrew perspective, that if this is the only feature that we're looking at, rage takes care of this. You can flavor your rage as drunkenness if that is a thing that you would like to play out. And I think that would be just fine at most tables. I would accept that as a dungeon master and allow a player to go down that route if the rest of the table was all right with it. Maybe if you're thinking about something like this, consider what already exists in the game, and if you can reflavor first before making an entire new subclass for a specific player if you're new to homebrew. Reflavoring is great. I know we've talked a little bit on the show about how reflavoring can't necessarily get you everywhere you want to go, but it can do a lot. Flavor is free. Your players should be allowed, within reason, within the fantasy of the world that you are playing in, to flavor various features differently than the book might flavor them. And maybe that saves you a little bit of time trying to homebrew something that's really specific. If there's something that kind of captures the same essence and fantasy, but just does it a little bit differently. But we press on with this terrible subclass to the level 7 features. You gain the Sober Up feature, which allows you to, when you finish a short rest, you can choose to regain up to 2 expended uses of your drink feature. So you can basically take away 2 drinks from yourself, perhaps taking yourself down from drunk to sober, or from very drunk to drunk. Now, I think you already know what I'm going to say, is that this is already too complicated. It relies too heavily on the previous mechanic of keep track of how many times you're drinking, while also not playing very well with the feature of drunkenness. If drunkenness is supposed to be a good thing that the character class wants to be under the effects of for a lot of their core features, then sobering up doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of cases. Might be useful, might not. It's not a great feature. It should, honestly, be folded into the original drunkenness feature and allow you to just do that as part of the overall drinking feature, is that on a short rest, you can eliminate some number of the drink uses. And then also at 7th level, for some reason, I decided also to do the thing that I have learned to do since then, which is make a bunch of features within the feature. And this is very close to another thing that exists in the game, which comes back to my recommendation of what can you reflavor. These are drunken stunts. You can choose 2 drunken stunts that you may perform while you are inebriated. You can use 3 drunken stunts per long rest at level 7, 1 more at levels 10 and 15, and you can choose additional stunts at level 10 and 18. So these are pretty much just glorified eldritch invocations. You can potentially cast Hideous Laughter. You can use one of your drunken stunts to give yourself advantage on the first attack you make on your turn, and that attack deals additional damage. While you're drunk, you may use your reaction to take less damage from weapon attacks and lash back out again. Honestly, the problem mostly with this is that A, it is a secondary and overcomplicated rock for this class. It does build off of the existing drink feature, but it adds even more complication to the existing feature in a way that is not good for a new player. This is a recipe for choice paralysis. In the same way that I would not have wanted to give that player access to Warlock Eldritch Invocations, or even in the case of this player, Battlemaster Maneuvers, this shouldn't be here. These are basically Eldritch Invocations and Battlemaster Maneuvers in different wording, which again, a lot of this could be fixed with flavor. A lot of this can be fixed with minor homebrew. For example, I think if you're interested in a little bit of homebrew but don't want to retool an entire subclass, perhaps consider taking one of these ideas and add it as a custom homebrew Battlemaster maneuver or a custom homebrew Eldritch Invocation, right? Try and figure out the balance aspect of it, right? Look at the similar features around that level marker and try and make something that feels similar in power level. Is it going to wildly overpower? Is it giving them access to a spell that is 3 or 4 levels higher than most invocations would allow? Maybe that's a higher level invocation, but the structure is there for all these kind of choice type features, things like invocations and maneuvers. Various other features within the game have a bunch of choices that you can make as the player to learn specific versions of the thing. And this could fit into that. A lot of these, maybe they don't exist as features within those other classes, but can you take the idea of it and add it as a piece of that class? Can you take an existing subclass and just change one feature a little bit to better fit your idea rather than making an entire new subclass for it? I think that would have worked so much better to have given this player, if they wanted something that had options and had a little bit more complexity, try a Battlemaster. Flavor a little bit of the Battlemaster maneuvers towards, this is a thing that comes from your drunken swagger. Then we get to level 10, and you can drink twice as a bonus action whenever you take a drink. You can drink 2 drinks as a fast drinker, which just gets you to the drunk condition more quickly, which again is another issue with this class, is that there is a barrier to entry with the drink feature. If you are trying to get up to the drunken level, you need to be there almost before the battle begins, and you need to maintain it. And you need to be either that or be just on the edge so that you can use one bonus action and get yourself too drunk so that you can make use of the features. If you're not there, if you don't have those features ready to go yet, and you jump into battle, it's going to be 3 or 4 rounds before you can use any of your cool drunk stuff, which is a problem. It is an unnecessary barrier to entry, and it already takes this class, which feels underpowered in general. It makes it slower to do what it wants to do. And oftentimes it's going to be too many rounds into combat before you get to actually do anything with this subclass. So that's another tip. Think about how often and how regularly a character is going to be able to do the thing that the class or the subclass is built to do. Look at the Arcane Archer, which I know we've talked about at great length, but the original Arcane Archer could only use 2 of their shots between short rests. So consider that most combats are going to last between 3 and 5 rounds, more likely 3. If you're a fighter at level 3, you're going to get to use 2 of those in one combat, and then you're just a regular fighter for the rest of that combat. And then if you hit another combat between short rests, you're also, 3 rounds of not being able to do anything cool during that combat. That's unfortunate until you get to a high enough level that you start to get one back when you roll initiative. But even then, you're a high enough level that you're attacking twice on your turn. So you're even more struggling to keep up. So all of that is to say, when you're building various features for subclasses especially, the amount of time that you are expecting the character class to use their feature, if it's a core class feature, if it is the rock, they should be able to use that at least once every combat. At least one time every combat, they should be able to do the thing that they want to do, or once per encounter, I should say, because combat isn't necessarily where every subclass is going to want to shine. But once per encounter, at least, they should be able to use that feature. And then it should recharge somehow up to that. Now, that's not necessarily, accounting for certain play styles, right? But if you look at something like Rage gets enough uses that you can go through a full adventuring day of a roughly 5 to 6 encounter day with 2 short rests built in, where the Rage becomes a limited resource. You probably will run out or get close to running out, but you can still use it consistently, right? Every time you get into something where you need it. Now, does everyone do a 6 encounter, 2 short rest adventuring day? No. But that's the way the game is balanced. That is the way that things have to be sort of structured in order to make everything feel like it's on the same power level. So with features like this, where the drunk condition has a floor that you have to hit first, it means that I am basically not allowing the player to engage with their features consistently unless they do a very specific playstyle choice. So consider that when you're doing homebrew. Consider how often a character or a player should be allowed to use this thing. If it's overly powerful, maybe that's something that should only be a once per day sort of situation. Or if it's a tertiary, peripheral, if it's a ribbon, if it's something that the class can do but shouldn't be able to do all the time because it's not central to the identity of that. If you think about things like channel divinity, right? There is obviously all clerics and paladins get channel divinity, but most of those things are pretty limited in use. You're saving them for when they're going to be the most useful. So they're not expected in its design to be the thing that you're going back to time and again, over and over and over in every combat to deal with it, because they're specialized. It's a specific feature that is tied to a piece of the identity, but really you look over at the other features to say, these are what defines who and what this character class does. Finally, in this mess of a fighter subclass, we have liquid strength. At 15th level, drinking increases your fortitude, and when you are drunk, your max HP is increased by a number equal to your fighter level. max HP is a complicated thing for a new player to understand. The difference between max HP, temporary HP, what can be healed, what's a pool that you can pull from, whatever. That's the other thing about this, is that if I was building this for an actual new player, now, being who I am, I would probably begin with reflavoring. And if I decided that it did need its own subclass, I would strip down these features to the absolute barest of bones. The drunk feature would be a little bit of a trade-off, a little bit much smaller, notably, a much smaller trade-off of benefit to penalty. And it would just be a thing that you could turn off and then would take some time to wear off. You couldn't probably get rid of it super easily, but you could turn it on and leave it on, and then it goes until it's done. And then maybe I would add some level of something similar to the drunken stunts, probably a much shorter, smaller list that is reliant on you choosing to do something every turn. Or when you activate your drunken condition, you choose perhaps a temperament. Drunken temperament could either be an angry temperament, joyful temperament, a sad temperament. And so one of those like 3 choices that you make every time you choose to be drunk allows for 1 additional benefit. And then I would basically entirely rewrite the 10th level feature, because if I'm choosing to make this a feature that doesn't require so many times of drinking and such a complicated track to keep tabs on, then I don't want to have a feature that is just, now you can use a bonus action to take 2 drinks. There should be something else there, probably another ribbon, because at this point fighters are getting a lot of attacks, they're getting a lot of their stuff and their combat prowess from main class features. So level 10 and 15 generally are there to build a little bit on what you have there, as well as adding a little bit more survivability or focusing on one aspect of the game there. So I would rewrite that feature entirely. I'm not sure what would fit there. Something probably that would just add on to the drunk feature a little bit. Maybe it doesn't last quite as long, and you can get closer to sober over a shorter amount of time so that you are not dealing with the penalties. Maybe something just to decrease the penalties while you are drunk. And you can kind of ignore a certain aspect of the penalties and just stick with the benefits. That's kind of a passive thing, but it feels right for a 10th level feature. You're about halfway through your class progression, and so you've, to some degree, mastered what you're able to do. And then probably something like liquid strength at 15th level would be correct, but I would simplify it again to something as easy as temporary hit points. Or, take one of these things that I made as a defensive drunken stunt. Things like, while you're drunk, you may use a bonus action to gain resistance to all damage except for psychic damage for 1 minute. Now that's kind of crazy. That's kind of intense for a level 7 drunken stunt feature, but maybe that's not super crazy at 15th level, especially if you can only do it once, perhaps, per long rest or short rest. I think all of those changes could make this a lot simpler, a lot more approachable for a new player, and would still fulfill the fantasy that this player was going for. I think the best thing you can do for your homebrew, first and foremost, is to read the other subclasses that you're trying to emulate, whether it's subclasses from the class that you are trying to build for, or whether it is classes or subclasses that have a similar feel to what you want to do, but maybe are just not exactly capturing the goals that you have in mind. Like I said, there are possibilities that I could have turned this into a barbarian. Or I took aspects of it from barbarian, but did I separate them clearly enough? Probably not. I took aspects of it from the battle master. I took aspects of it from the warlock. Did I separate those things cleanly enough that I couldn't have just worked with one of those classes? Consider those things. Read those other subclasses. See what they do. See the progression. What does it feel like? What does each feature ask the player to do? Is it a passive thing? Is it an active choice? How does it interact with the main class features? If you look a little bit after that in my creation log here, one of the next subclasses that I made was a paladin subclass. And for that, I really used another one of the paladin subclasses as a template. But I also took that time to consider, what did I want this paladin to do? And did I want it to be different from other paladin subclasses? Could I reflavor? Well, no, I couldn't. I wanted to do something very different with it. I wanted to do something that was maybe crossing over into the realm of artificer a little bit. And so what could I do to latch on to that identity a little bit? And I noticed, well, let's move towards intelligence, not as necessarily a base for the subclass, but something that these subclass features can benefit. A lot of these subclass features for other paladins don't really address that specifically. Can maybe do wisdom saving throws or keep you from the frightened condition. But what about intelligence checks or intelligence saving throws? So I created a college or an oath of creation, one that allowed its user to channel divinity and infuse artisans' tools with divine power. It had a unique spell list that was mostly around creating and manifesting features that were pulled somewhat from the artisan or from the artificer's spell list instead of other ones. So educating yourself on what the template is for the class is absolutely paramount to not overcomplicating. And then once you've made something, step away. Step away for a while and come back to it, or get somebody with fresh eyes, maybe somebody who doesn't understand the game as well as you do, to come and look at it. Do they understand it? Do they feel like they could pick it up and play it? Well, if they can't, maybe that's an idea. Maybe there's something there that you can simplify or that you can change so that it doesn't require multiple counters or tokens or things like that. Try and figure out what the rocks and the ribbons are of your class or your subclass that you're building, and try and make sure you're not adding too much into the pot. If you're making a subclass, there's already a class there. There's already features that are existing that you can't change, that have to be there for the base class. A little bit goes a long way with a subclass, and flavor goes even further. A player is going to take your idea for a subclass and they are going to crank it into overdrive and do whatever they want with it and make it feel completely unique, and the character itself will feel like the identity of the subclass just because the subclass is there to serve as the anchor. Even if there's not a ton of features, even if there's not so many choices to be made, sometimes choice paralysis is the killer. Anyway, I don't know if that was useful. I hope that was useful to you all listening out there. I'll share this on the Patreon for free. You can go over to the Patreon at patreon.com/College of Creation Pod, and you can join at the free tier and you can see all of this stuff. I'll share a couple of my old creations. I'm not precious about these things. They're not well crafted. They're not nice. They're not probably usable in a lot of cases, but they were a huge part of me learning how to play this game and how to make things for it, how to understand the syntax and the structure of it. So check them out if you'd like. Next time, I want to talk some about homebrewing for systems that are not D&D. How do we do that? How do we assess other games for what is homebrewable, what needs to be homebrewed, and what opportunities there are to make your own world exist in other games? Can you take pieces of D&D and put them into other games? Can you take pieces of other games and put them into D&D? How would you go about that? It can be a very complicated and interesting experiment. I do it a lot, but it's a great time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that works. I hope you'll join me then, and I hope that this was instructive or entertaining for you in some way, shape, or form. Until next time, I will talk to you later. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.